Hey guys, this is Jason Cadwell with Cadwell Realty Group again, and just wanted to thank you for tuning in to us. And today what I wanted to talk about is why I believe there will not be a recession in this decade. One of the most popular questions that we've had recently, and I think this always goes as a market's heating up, is when's going to be the next housing bubble? When is going to be the next recession? People are always asking us, what do we think, and why, to be honest. So what I want to do is, just for those who really aren't aware of my career, I've been in real estate almost 18 years. It'll be 18 years in February of next year. And so during that time, starting in 2001, the market was pretty good for 4 or 5 years. You know, we had 9/11 in 2001. We had a little bit of a pullback then, but we didn't have an actual recession. And, you know, everybody's aware, if you've been around the housing market at all in the last 10 years, that really in Oregon, we started seeing things around late 2007 and into 2008. So, I mean, that's literally a decade ago, 10 years ago. It's hard to believe that it's been that long. But it's, you know, we started here and went down into the pit and have come back out very nicely, especially since I call it the mid 2012 is when we really started to see it. We really started to, I believe, feel it, and everybody seeing things for the better was in 2013, 2014. And so one of the things that we learn, or at least fortunately I've learned, is that to watch what's happened in the past and see how you can protect yourself for the future, if you will. And one of those things is just to look at the past events. So I'm going to do this in a couple parts because I tend to ramble on, but I want to talk about just a few things that we saw in the recessionary times compared to now of why, again, I believe in the next couple years, meaning up through 2020 into 2021, at least the foreseeable future, that I don't believe a recession is coming. And so first thing I want to talk about is loans. The type of loans that people are getting right now, in the recessionary time. Let's start there. Everybody's always heard the term, you know, if you can fog a mirror, you can get a loan. And while it was a little tongue-in-cheek talking about it, it's really kind of what was going on. And let's be clear, this wasn't the loan officers or your great mortgage brokers locally. It wasn't their fault. This wasn't their deal. This wasn't something to blame on appraisers. This was something that, as we know, that Wall Street, who buys packaged up mortgages, asked for. You know, and so they got to a point where they were accepting loans that you could walk in and say, I make this much money, and away you go. They would give you a loan. If you couldn't afford it, typically on a 30-year fixed loan, they would do a adjustable rate mortgage. And we know what happens with those. You start really low, but over time, your payment raises. And so back then when that happened, when those payments would reset and go to the next phase, if you will, or the next interest rate hike, everything blew up because most people couldn't afford that. So those kinds of loans, first, to get a loan today, let's talk about today, you have to have great credit. You have to have good, steady income. You have to be able to prove what's going on. You have to have low debt to income ratio. So that's important. You know, the loans that are being made today are not those kinds of loans in the past. So people typically have some skin in the game. There are some great still programs such as VA that offers a zero down program, which is fantastic. But in the big scheme, everybody is on a different playing field now when it comes to the type of loans that you get. And that is super important. That's puts strength in our economy, and strengthen the foundation of our economy, I think is the critical thing. So again, something that's very, very important. During the recessionary time, we saw unemployment do some different things. We saw that start to increase, and we saw some job cuts and different things with companies that, again, were subtle. But at the time, we didn't realize really what was going on until we were buried in the recession. And then, we saw what unemployment did at that time. Great news right now is, if you've been looking around, there is tons and tons of jobs available, and low unemployment rate. So that's a fantastic scenario as well. Yes, wages are higher, which is great. But at the same time, that causes inflationary things on cost of goods and cost of, go to a McDonald's and see what a hamburger costs now. So it's a whole different game than what it was back then. But again, we believe that that is all great stuff. So one of the biggest things that I think is it's a catch-22. It's good for our marketplace, yet it's harder on the everyday consumer, is rent prices. So back during the recession, we're going to call it 2008, when you saw a house for rent, your typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square foot house was renting for about $700, which that was great. That meant, but also what that meant is there was a lot of vacancy. There was lots of people who could rent a house, because people were buying so many houses during that time. It took renters out of those homes and put them into buying houses, which was great, but it was on false pretenses. Again, back to the loans that we were talking about that really didn't work and weren't a fixed deal. So now what's happened is, what we have to remember too, and this will be another topic for another time, but we've had since 2008, we've had another generation of people come into the rental market, into the housing market, that whole millennial group that has come in to be consumers and has eaten up a lot of that rental inventory, and so there's a demand for that. But also what you've seen is rent prices have skyrocketed, and a house that was back then $700, and I'm talking about the Willamette Valley here, more in a national range, prices would have been higher probably. But from a rental standpoint, back then it was $700. Today, that same house rents for $1,500 all day long. When I talk to lots of landlords and property managers, and when they have a rental that comes open for a standalone home, not an apartment, so apartments are still a lot of money as well. All tides rise, if you will, as rents have gone up. But one thing to consider is when people are applying for a rental, you're going to have competition. You're going to have 10, 15 people applying for the same place. So what that does is that, there's a lot more demand for that, therefore the price rises. What my point to this is if we're ever if someone has a problem with a job, or, a smaller company has a cutback or something like that, in the 2008 time, we saw a lot of people just kind of step back and go, you know what? We can't get a job. We can't find a job to replace our income. And so this isn't going to work out for us. So we're actually going to just leave this house alone. We can't make the payment because our interest rate went up, and we can't do anything. So we're going to go rent a house. And now the difference is, if you go to rent a house, it's probably equal to or more than what your current mortgage payment is. So it's really going to force somebody to get creative and figure it out. And while it is going to be a struggle, they're gonna be having the ability to stay there and figure out their situation. And the great news is there's jobs for them to go get if they need something. So to me, those are great things. I believe those are forces, at least right now, that are showing us that in the next couple, 2-3 years anyways, as far as anybody can really look out, that why I don't believe we're going to go into a recession. Continue to believe that while prices have continued to go up, hopefully there will be some stabilization there. Doing a lot of new construction, we realize that prices continue to go up for new construction due to, you know, increased costs or whatever. But anyways, at this point, I'm going to leave it there. We'll track in on this a little bit again further in another video. At least wanted to give you my input on why I think, you know, we're not going to be going into a recession anytime in the next couple of years, or basically in this decade through 2020. So we will talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in.